The city of Chicago never really slept, and Amelia Turner had stopped sleeping years ago. Not properly, anyway. She moved through the late-night crowd at Harlow's Diner. Like someone who had learned to survive on 3 hours of rest and strong black coffee. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled, her brown hair tied back in a loose ponytail. Her sneakers had a small hole near the left toe that she kept covering with a strip of electrical tape. She had big green eyes that most people noticed right away, and a smile that she gave freely. Even on the hardest nights, Harlow's was the kind of diner that smelled like butter and maple syrup, no matter what time of day it was. The red vinyl booths were cracked in places. The neon sign outside flickered every Thursday without fail, and the jukebox in the corner still played songs from the 1980s. Amelia loved it. It was the kind of place where people told her their problems over coffee refills and left. Her tips with handwritten thank you notes. It was honest work. She had never been ashamed of it. She was wiping down table 7 when her phone buzzed inside her apron pocket. She already knew what it was before she looked. Dr. Philip Morgan had been calling more often lately, and every call meant news she was not ready to hear. She stepped into the narrow hallway near the kitchen and answered. "Miss Turner," said Dr. Morgan in that careful, measured voice he used when things were serious. "Dennis had another episode this afternoon. His heart function is declining faster than we expected. I won't sugarcoat it for you. He needs the surgery within the next 2 months. After that, I cannot make any promises about outcomes." Amelia pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes. Dennis was 17. He liked basketball and terrible action movies and always burned his toast because he got distracted reading comics. He was the only family she had left. "How much?" she asked quietly. "The full procedure, hospital stay, and post-operative care will run approximately $240,000. I know that's a significant number." It was not just significant, it was impossible. She thanked the doctor, hung up, and stood in that hallway for a full minute before she went back to her tables. Carol, her coworker and closest friend, caught her eye across the diner and gave her a look that asked everything without saying a word. Amelia shook her head slightly. Not now. She finished her shift at midnight, counted her tips, and walked the 6 blocks home in the cold. The next morning was a Saturday, which meant Amelia covered the breakfast rush alone because their third waitress had called in sick again. The diner filled up quickly with the usual crowd, and she was moving fast, balancing plates and filling cups. When the front door opened and brought in a different kind of customer entirely, she noticed him because everyone noticed him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His dark hair was cut close and neat, and he had the kind of jaw that looked like it had never relaxed in his entire life. He sat alone at table 3, the small corner booth near the window. And he did not look at his phone the way most people did when they were waiting. He just looked out at the street with an expression that was hard to read. Amelia walked over with her notepad. "Good morning. What can I get you?" He looked up. His eyes were gray, sharp, and tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Just coffee," he said. "Anything to eat?" "No." She poured his coffee and moved on. She was not the type to be impressed by expensive coats. What happened next was something she would think about for a long time afterward. A little girl at the next table knocked over a full glass of orange juice, and it splashed across the floor and onto the edge of the man's coat. The mother started apologizing frantically. The child began to cry, and Amelia was already moving with a cloth before anyone else reacted. She cleaned the floor quickly, handed the child a paper napkin to stop her tears, and told her it was perfectly fine because accidents were just surprises in disguise. The man watched all of this without speaking. When Amelia brought his check 20 minutes later, he placed his card on the table and said, "You handled that well. It's just juice," she said. I wasn't talking about the juice. She did not know what to say to that, so she just took his card and processed the payment. The tip he left was $300 on a $4 cup of coffee. She stood at the register, staring at the receipt for a long moment before Carol appeared at her shoulder. "Who is that?" Carol whispered, "I have no idea." But Amelia found out 2 days later, because he came back. He came back on Monday morning. And then again on Wednesday, always ordering just coffee. Always sitting at table 3. On Friday, he ordered toast and ate exactly half of it. Amelia began to realize that he was not coming for the food or even the coffee. He was coming because he was watching her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that felt more like study. Like a man who was trying to make a decision and needed more information, she was right. On the following Tuesday, when the breakfast rush had cleared and only 2 other customers remained at the far end of the diner, Sebastian Hartwell set down his coffee cup and said without any preamble at all, "I know about your brother." Amelia went completely still. "Dennis Turner," he continued calmly. 17 years old. Heart condition. Needs surgery. $240,000. I also know you've applied for 3 medical grants and been declined for all of them. Think that you've been working double shifts here for the past 8 months trying to save what you can? She stared at him. "How do you know any of that?" "I had someone look into your situation." "Okay, that is an enormous invasion of my privacy," he said, without apology. "It is. I'm not pretending otherwise." Her jaw tightened. "Then why are you telling me?" He folded his hands on the table. "Because I want to offer you a solution. I will pay for your brother's surgery in full, including all recovery costs and any complications that arise afterward. I will also set up a trust fund in his name for college." He paused. "In exchange, I need you to marry me." The diner seemed to go very quiet. The jukebox had stopped playing. The 2 customers at the far end were not paying attention. Carol had disappeared into the kitchen. "I'm sorry," Amelia said slowly. "Did you just propose to me in a diner?" "I don't call it a proposal," Sebastian said. "It's an arrangement. My company is about to close a major deal with a European investment group. Their lead partner is traditional. He expects the CEO he's trusting with $400 million to be a man with stability, a family, a settled life. I have none of those things. I need a wife for a minimum of 1 year, someone credible, someone genuine, someone who won't be bought in the usual ways." He looked at her directly. "You fit what I need." Amelia set her notepad down very carefully. "You walked into my diner? Had me investigated, decided I was the right type of person to use for your business deal. And now you're offering me money to marry you, save your brother's life." He corrected quietly. That was the part that made it impossible to simply walk away. She thought about Dennis that morning, pale against his hospital pillow, pretending he felt fine because he never wanted her to worry. She thought about the grant rejection letters stacked on her kitchen counter. She thought about the electrical tape on her shoe and the way she had counted her tips 3 times last night, hoping the number would change. "I need to think," she said. "Take 48 hours." Sebastian replied. He slid a card across the table. "My private number. If you don't call, I'll understand. And I won't contact you again." He left a tip, buttoned his coat, and walked out into the gray Chicago morning like he had simply ordered coffee and nothing more. Amelia picked up his card and held it in her palm. Outside, a bus rolled past the window. Inside the diner, the jukebox clicked back on and started playing. Something soft and old about second chances. She stood there for a long time, the card warm in her hand, the sound of the city pressing in around her. And she knew before she even admitted it to herself that she was going to call. Not because she wanted to, but because Dennis was the only person in the world who still called her his big sister. And she would do anything, absolutely anything, to keep him alive. Amelia called Sebastian at exactly 11 o'clock the following morning. She had spent the entire 48 hours telling herself she would not do it. And then she had spent the last hour of that time sitting at Dennis's bedside watching him sleep with a monitor beeping softly beside him. And that was all it took to make the decision final. Sebastian answered on the second ring. "I have conditions," she said. Before he could even speak, there was a brief pause. "All right. Dennis gets the surgery scheduled within 2 weeks. Not after the wedding, not after any paperwork. Before anything else happens, he is in that hospital and that procedure is booked." "Agreed. I will not pretend to be someone I am not. If your business partners expect a polished socialite, they are going to be disappointed. Because I am a waitress from the south side of Chicago, and I am not going to perform a character for anyone." Another pause. "And this time, She thought she heard something close to respect in his silence. Agreed, and I want my own room. That was already part of the arrangement, he said simply. She exhaled. Then I'll do it. The wedding happened on a Thursday morning 3 weeks later. At the Cook County Clerk's office, with Carol and one of Sebastian's attorneys as witnesses, Amelia wore a cream-colored dress she had bought from a consignment shop on Michigan Avenue for $62. It had small buttons down the back and a slightly uneven hem on the left side, and she thought it was the most beautiful thing she owned. She carried no flowers. She had done her own hair. Sebastian wore a dark suit and said the required words in a voice that was clear and steady and entirely unreadable. When the clerk told him he could kiss the bride, he turned to Amelia and simply pressed his lips to her cheek for exactly 1 second. It was polite. It was nothing. And yet she felt her face go warm anyway, which irritated her. Dennis had watched the whole thing from a chair near the wall, still pale from his pre-surgery consultations, but grinning widely. He leaned over to Carol afterward and whispered, "He's intimidating." Carol had whispered back, "So is she, honestly." Dennis had laughed, and Amelia had heard it from across the room and felt something settle in her chest. The surgery was scheduled for the following Monday. It was successful. Dr. Morgan called Amelia at 7 in the evening to tell her that Dennis had come through with no complications and that his heart function was already showing improvement. She was sitting in the vast kitchen of Sebastian's penthouse apartment on the 42nd floor when the call came, and she cried so hard that she had to put the phone down on the marble counter and just breathe for a moment. Sebastian came in from his study to get water and found her like that. He stopped in the doorway. "Dennis?" he asked. She nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "He's okay. He's going to be okay." Sebastian set his glass down and said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Good." And the word was quiet and genuine in a way that surprised her. Living with Sebastian, Hartwell was nothing like Amelia had imagined, mostly because she had imagined someone cold and commanding who issued instructions and expected everything to bend around his schedule. The reality was stranger and in some ways harder to navigate because he was simply distant. He moved through his own home like a guest who had forgotten he lived there. He ate breakfast early and alone. He worked until 10 or 11 at night. He was unfailingly polite to her in a way that felt more like a wall than a kindness. She had her own bedroom at the far end of the hall. It was larger than her entire previous apartment, with a window that looked out over Lake Michigan. She had put one of Dennis's drawings on the nightstand and a photograph of her parents on the dresser. And those two things made the enormous room feel at least partially like hers. Gwen Hartwell appeared for the first time on a Saturday afternoon. 10 days after the wedding, she arrived without calling ahead, swept past the housekeeper at the door, and found Amelia in the living room reading a book with her feet tucked under her on the couch. Gwen was 51, elegant in the way that very expensive maintenance produces, with Sebastian's same gray eyes, but none of his quiet quality. Hers were sharp and constantly calculating. She looked at Amelia the way a person looks at a stain on a white tablecloth. "So you're the waitress," she said. Amelia closed her book. "So you're the sister," Gwen blinked. She had clearly expected something more submissive. She settled herself into the armchair across from Amelia with the deliberate grace of someone reminding the room who held authority. "I want you to understand something," Gwen said pleasantly. "Sebastian has made poor decisions before. His last engagement was a disaster that cost him 2 years and a great deal of money. I have spent considerable energy protecting this family's reputation, and I intend to continue doing so." "That sounds exhausting," Amelia said. Gwen's smile thinned. "I'm sure a woman in your position finds it easy to be flip. You've landed somewhere very comfortable very quickly. But comfort can be temporary. So can patience," Amelia replied, without raising her voice at all. They regarded each other for a long moment. Then Sebastian walked in from the hallway, still in his workout clothes, saw Gwen, and stopped. "You didn't call," he said to his sister. "I don't need to call. I'm family. Amelia's also family now," he said. His voice was perfectly level. "Treat her accordingly." It was the first time he had said anything that directly defended her position, and Amelia noticed it even though she kept her face neutral. Gwen noticed it too, which was perhaps more important. The European investment meeting happened in the 4th week of their marriage. Sebastian came to Amelia's bedroom door the evening before and knocked quietly. "Come in," she said. He stood in the doorway. He was holding a small velvet box and looked, for the first time since she had known him, genuinely uncomfortable. "The investor, his name is Edmund Farr. He will expect to meet you at dinner tomorrow night. He is traditional in the way I described. He'll want to see a real marriage." He held out the box. "This was my mother's ring. I'd like you to wear it tomorrow if you're comfortable doing so." Amelia opened the box. It was a simple oval sapphire surrounded by small diamonds set in gold. Nothing flashy. "Something real. Your mother's," she said quietly. She was a practical woman, Sebastian said. She would have liked the fact that it was going to someone who isn't impressed by expensive things. Amelia looked up at him. It was the most personal thing he had ever said to her. "I'll wear it," she said. The dinner with Edmund Farr was held at a restaurant on the 53rd floor of a building downtown, and Amelia wore a navy dress that Carol had helped her pick out. With the sapphire ring and her hair down and simple earrings, she was nervous in the elevator and hid it by standing straight. Edmund Farr was 70 years old, white-haired, and had the warm directness of someone who had built his career on reading people accurately. He shook Amelia's hand and then held it for a moment longer than expected. "Sebastian tells me you work in a diner," he said. "I did," she said. "I'm taking some time right now to be available for my brother's recovery." "What do you like about it?" "The work." She thought about it honestly. "People tell you things in diners that they don't tell anyone else. You learn very quickly that everyone is carrying something. It makes it hard to be unkind." Edmund Farr smiled slowly. He looked at Sebastian. "She's real," he said simply. Sebastian looked at Amelia, and something passed across his face that she could not quite name. "Yes," he said, "she is." Dinner went well. The deal moved forward. On the drive home, they sat in the back of the car in comfortable quiet, watching the city lights move past the windows. After a while, Sebastian said, "You didn't need to be nervous." "I know that now," she said. "You were, though." "Of course I was." Most smiled. She saw it happen and then stop, like he had remembered partway through that smiling was something he had agreed not to do. She looked back out the window, but that almost smile stayed with her. All the way up to the 42nd floor. The trouble started in the 6th week, and it came from Richard Vance. Richard was Sebastian's former business partner, and the man who had, 3 years earlier, been sleeping with Sebastian's fiancée while pretending to be his closest friend. The betrayal had cost Sebastian the engagement and permanently altered something in the way he related to people. He had told Amelia none of this directly. She had learned it in pieces from Carol, who had a gift for finding information. And from the way Sebastian's jaw changed whenever Richard's name came up in conversation. Richard reached out through a mutual contact and arranged a meeting with Sebastian under the guise of a potential collaboration. Sebastian, against his better judgment, agreed to one coffee meeting. He told Amelia about it that evening in a tone that suggested he was still not sure why he had said yes. "Be careful," she said simply. He looked at her. "You know who he is?" "I know enough." Sebastian was quiet for a moment. "You researched me?" "Researched me first," she pointed out. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was in the same neighborhood. The coffee meeting with Richard did not go the way Sebastian expected. Richard was charming and strategic, and within 20 minutes he had steered the conversation to Amelia. He had done his own research. He knew about the arrangement. He knew the marriage was a contract, and he told Sebastian with a careful smile that he intended to make that information available to Edmund, far unless Sebastian cut him into the new deal. Sebastian came home that evening and found Amelia teaching Dennis card tricks at the kitchen table. Dennis had been discharged from the hospital and was staying with them during his recovery, sleeping in the guest room and eating approximately everything in the refrigerator. Sebastian stood in the kitchen doorway and watched the two of them for a moment. Dennis was laughing at something Amelia had said. She was trying to keep a straight face and failing completely. Sebastian had not seen her laugh like that before. Not that freely. It changed her face in a way that made the room feel different. He told her about Richard after Dennis had gone to bed. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When he finished, she sat with it for a moment and then said, "What does Edmund Farr care about most? Not the contract. What does he actually care about?" Sebastian thought about it. "Character," he said finally. He said it himself. "He wants to know the people he works with are real. And tell him the truth," Amelia said. He stared at her. "Tell him our marriage started as an arrangement. Tell him it started as a man who saw a woman who needed help and offered it, and a woman who chose to protect her family. Tell him it was practical at the start." She held his gaze. "You don't have to lie about where something began. You just have to be honest about where it is now." The room was very quiet. "And where is it now?" Sebastian asked. His voice was lower than usual. Amelia looked at him steadily, and for a moment neither of them looked away. The kitchen felt smaller than it actually was. "I think," she said carefully, "that it's somewhere neither of us planned to be." Sebastian said nothing. But he did not look away either. Outside the window, Chicago moved in its endless, indifferent rush. And in the kitchen of a 42nd floor apartment, two people who had started with a contract were standing on the edge of something neither of them had the words for yet. The morning after their kitchen conversation, Sebastian called Edmund Farr and asked for a private meeting. No restaurant, no formal setting, just two men and an honest conversation. Edmund agreed without hesitation, which told Sebastian something important about the kind of person he was dealing with. They met at Edmund's hotel suite, overlooking the lake. Sebastian sat across from the older man and told him everything. He explained how he had watched Amelia in that diner for 2 weeks before approaching her. He explained the arrangement, the contract, the 1-year agreement. He explained Dennis and the surgery and the sapphire ring that had belonged to his mother. He did not dress any of it up or make it sound more romantic than it had been at the start. Edmund Farr listened to all of it without changing his expression. When Sebastian finished, Edmund was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his coffee cup and said, "Do you know what I have learned in 50 years of doing business with people?" Sebastian waited. "The ones who lie to protect themselves are everywhere. The ones who tell the truth when it costs them something are rare." He set his cup down. "I am not interested in perfect marriages or perfect people, Sebastian. I am interested in character. And a man who walks in here and tells me the truth when he could have easily hidden it is a man I want to work with." He extended his hand across the table. "The deal stands." Sebastian shook his hand, felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for a very long time. When he came home that afternoon, Amelia was in the living room helping Dennis with a physical therapy exercise his cardiologist had recommended. Dennis was complaining loudly that it was boring, and Amelia was telling him firmly that boring kept him alive, so he could manage it. Sebastian stood in the hallway watching them for a moment before either of them noticed him. Dennis looked up first. "How did it go?" "The deal stands," Sebastian said. Amelia looked up from where she was kneeling beside her brother. Something moved across her face, warm and genuine, and she said, "I told you." "You did," Sebastian agreed. Dennis looked between the two of them with the sharp, amused perception of a 17-year-old who understood more than adults expected. He said nothing, which was unusually restrained for him, and went back to his exercises with a small private smile. That evening, Sebastian did something he had not done in 3 years. He cooked dinner. It was not elaborate. Pasta with a simple tomato sauce, garlic bread that was slightly too dark on one side, and a salad that he assembled with military precision. Amelia came into the kitchen following the smell and stopped in the doorway looking genuinely surprised. "You cook?" she said poorly, he admitted, without turning around. She came and stood beside him and looked at the sauce. "You need more basil?" "I don't have more basil." "You have a 42-floor apartment and a housekeeper and approximately 17 different types of olive oil, and you don't have basil?" He looked at her. "Would you like to critique my grocery choices, or would you like to eat?" She laughed. It was the same laugh he had seen in the kitchen with Dennis. Unguarded and real, and it hit him somewhere. Behind the sternum with a force he was not prepared for. They ate, the three of them, at the kitchen, tabled with no formal place settings, and Dennis, telling a long and only partially coherent story about something that had happened during his hospital stay involving a confused orderly and a missing pudding cup. Sebastian found himself laughing twice during the story, genuinely, in a way that felt unfamiliar and good. After dinner, Dennis went to bed early, still building his strength, and Amelia washed the dishes even though the dishwasher was right there. Because she said she thought better with her hands busy, Sebastian dried them, standing beside her at the sink. And for a while, neither of them said anything at all. Then Amelia said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask," he said. "Your old partner. What happened with him exactly?" "I know the outline, but not the real version." Sebastian was quiet for a moment, drying a plate with steady, careful movements. "His name was Richard Vance, and I trusted him completely for 6 years. He was my best man at an engagement party. He gave a speech. He had been involved with my fiancée for most of that time. I found out 3 weeks before the wedding." Amelia did not say she was sorry or make a sound of sympathy. She just kept washing the next dish and let him continue if he wanted to. He did want to. "The worst part was not losing her," he said. "I think I knew by then that what we had was more about convenience than anything real. The worst part was that I had trusted him, that I had believed someone was exactly what they appeared to be, and I had been completely wrong. After that, I stopped trusting my own judgment about people." "Is that why you had me investigated before you approached me?" she asked. "Not accusatory, just honest." "Yes," he said. "I needed data instead of instinct, because I didn't trust my instincts anymore." Amelia handed him the last dish. She turned and leaned against the counter, looking at him directly in the way she always did, without flinching or performing. "Your instincts are fine," she said. "You just let one bad experience convince you they were broken." He looked at her. "You saw something real in a diner when you didn't have to look at all," she said. "That was instinct. That was you." Sebastian set the dish down carefully. The kitchen was very quiet. The city hummed 42 floors below them. "Amelia," he said. And something in the way he said her name was different from every other time he had said it before. She waited. "I need to tell you something, and I want to say it correctly. So I'm going to think about the words for a moment." "Take your time," she said softly. He looked at her steadily. "When I made that arrangement with you, I was honest about my reasons. I needed a wife for business purposes, and I thought I could keep it entirely practical and clean. I told myself I was helping you, and that was enough justification." He paused. "I was wrong about being able to keep it practical. I was wrong about what this was going to become. I don't know exactly when it changed. I think it might have been the night you told me your conditions across a diner table, like you were negotiating a labor contract. And I realized I had never met anyone who scared me a little in a way I actually respected." Amelia said nothing. Her eyes were steady on his. "I am not good at this," he said. "I have kept people at a distance for 3 years, and I have told myself that was wisdom. But watching you walk through my home and my life and refuse to be diminished by any of it, watching you love your brother and stand up to Gwen and make Edmund Farr laugh in about 4 minutes when it took me for meetings, I think what I've been calling wisdom was actually fear." He held her gaze. "I don't want to keep being afraid of the wrong things." The silence between them was not empty. It was full of everything that had been building since a cup of coffee in a diner with a cracked vinyl booth. Amelia pushed off from the counter slowly and crossed the small distance between them. She reached up and put her hand flat against his chest. Over his heart, the way someone checks to make sure something is still running. "It's about time," she said quietly. He covered her hand with his. His other hand came up to her face, and he held it there for a moment before he kissed her. Gently at first, and then with the kind of honesty that only happens when someone has finally stopped pretending. When they broke apart, she was looking at him with those green eyes that had never once pretended to feel something they did not, and she said, "For what it's worth, I think my instincts were fine too. I just needed time to trust them." He rested his forehead against hers. "How much time do you need?" "I think I already ran out," she said. Richard Vance sent his ultimatum in writing 2 days later through a lawyer, demanding a 10% stake in the Hartwell Farr deal in exchange for his silence about the nature of Sebastian and Amelia's marriage. Sebastian forwarded the letter to Edmund Farr with a single line attached. You already know the full story. Do with this what you think is right. Edmund Farr's legal team responded within 24 hours. They had enough documentation of Richard's attempted extortion to pursue criminal charges, and they did exactly that. Richard Vance's career in finance was over within a month. Sebastian did not feel the satisfaction he had expected. He mostly felt tired of old wounds taking up space. He told Amelia about it one evening on the balcony, both of them wrapped in separate blankets against the November cold. The lake spread out below them, dark and endless. Are you glad? She asked. He thought about it honestly. I'm glad it's finished. I don't think I feel glad about him specifically. I just want to stop giving that part of my life any more of my time. She nodded. That's healthier than glad. Gwen Hartwell came for dinner the following Sunday at Sebastian's invitation. Amelia had cooked, which had surprised Gwen visibly, and which Dennis had announced loudly was an incredible turn of events, given what Sebastian had done to that pasta last week. Gwen had looked between all three of them at that table, and something in her expression shifted. Not softened exactly, but recalibrated. She had spent so long protecting Sebastian from bad choices that she had forgotten to consider the possibility of a good one. After dinner, when Sebastian and Dennis had gone to watch something on television, Gwen found herself alone in the kitchen with Amelia, who was making tea and humming something quietly. You're not what I expected, Gwen said. I know, Amelia replied. She handed Gwen a cup without being asked how she took it. It was fixed exactly right, which meant she had been paying attention. You expected someone who needed to be managed. Gwen wrapped her hands around the cup. Sebastian has been hurt before, so as he told me, Amelia said. I'm not going to hurt him. Not because I made a contract, but because he doesn't deserve it, and I'm not that kind of person. She looked at Gwen steadily. I think you know I'm not, or you would still be fighting harder. Gwen was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, take care of him. I intend to, Amelia said. You could help by trusting him to make his own choices. It was not a gentle thing to say. But it was a true one, and Gwen, who had spent her whole life respecting truth even when she did not like it, heard it as it was meant. She stayed for another hour after dinner. When she left, she kissed Amelia once on the cheek, which neither of them acknowledged directly, and told Sebastian that his wife had very good instincts about tea. Dennis was discharged from his recovery program in December, cleared for normal activity with regular monitoring and a follow-up schedule that Dr. Morgan called genuinely optimistic. On the morning, he officially moved back to his own apartment, the one Sebastian had quietly arranged for him in a building 12 blocks away, close enough to visit easily and far enough to have his own life. Dennis stood in the penthouse hallway with his bag over his shoulder and looked at his sister. Are you happy? He asked her, because he was 17 and still young enough to ask the direct questions that adults learned to dance around. Amelia looked past him to where Sebastian was coming, down the hallway carrying a box of Dennis's things that had accumulated over the weeks of his stay. Sebastian caught her eye and raised an eyebrow at the box, as if asking where she wanted it. And she pointed toward the door, and he adjusted his direction without a word. Easy and natural and entirely unrehearsed. She looked back at Dennis. Yes, she said, I am. Dennis grinned the wide, uncomplicated grin of someone whose heart was working the way it was supposed to. And he hugged her hard. The year that had started with a contract ended quietly. The way real things tend to end, not with a dramatic announcement or a grand gesture, but with an ordinary Tuesday evening in a kitchen where someone was making tea and someone else was reading at the table nearby, and the city moved below them, doing what cities do. And neither of them needed to say anything at all, because everything that mattered had already been said. 6 months after that, on a Saturday morning in the same Cook County clerk's office where they had first stood together, Sebastian Hartwell and Amelia Turner were married again. No lawyers, no contracts, no conditions. Carol was there, crying loudly and not apologizing for it. Dennis was there in a new suit that he had picked out himself, standing straight and healthy and grinning so wide it looked like it might be permanent. Edmund Farr had sent flowers that morning with a card that said simply, Character holds Amelia wore the same cream dress with the slightly uneven hem. Because it still fit, and because she liked the idea of beginning something real in the same clothes she had worn when she began something honest. Sebastian, standing beside her with the gray eyes that had once looked so tired and now looked like they had somewhere to be, reached over before the clerk even began and took her hand. Not for the ceremony, just because he wanted to. And Amelia Turner, the girl who had grown up counting tips and taping her shoes, together and believing that love was something other people got to have, stood in that ordinary room with her brother Healthy beside her, and a man holding her hand who had learned the hard way that everything he actually needed had walked into his life carrying a coffee pot and wearing electrical tape on her left shoe. She held his hand back, and that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.